Body image is something that I think many of us can say like we grapple with in terms of just like figuring out what that looks like for us. So can you talk a little bit about like when did you really become aware of your body, whether that's like, your shape or just like the attention that you were receiving because of your body? What was that experience like?
I think it was from a very young age, because especially I've always been like a thicker kid. I went to an old, very thin doctor, and when I was younger, I remember being like third grade, and then being like, she needs to go on a diet, she needs to be involved in everything. And I was already involved in everything. I was doing soccer, I was doing ballet, I was doing jazz, I was doing tap. I was just like a thicker girl.
Yeah.
And I remember him very obviously, he just disappeared from the room for a second, and he came back with a bowl of carrots and celery, and he proceeded to eat them in front of me in third grade. And he was like, this is what you need to be doing.
Wow.
And my parents and I, we were just like,
Oh my God.
this is what she does.
I think it's so interesting that you guys say that your experiences of being aware of your body really occurred for you like going to the doctor, because for me it was always being around my other family members. And I don't know if it's just because I come from like Caribbean heritage, but I've always been told about my body. Like it's always been something that's been pointed out. And when you're called fat in the Caribbean culture, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
But when that transfers over to the American culture and your classmates and other people that you know are calling you that, it's like, how am I supposed to feel about this? So it's always been something that's been difficult for me to deal with. But getting older, like I feel like I've come to terms more with it and accepted my body for what it is.
I've always been an athlete, and so I think for me it really became apparent when I was in gymnastics and dance, and my teacher said like, oh, you need a training bra, like it's time. And I remember shopping for a training bra, and I was like, well, why do I need this? Like I didn't understand like that it was happening, because it was about fourth grade. I was like, oh no, this happens later, like why is this happening now? And so I think, and my mom explained to me that sometimes in African American girls we do develop earlier. So I think that's around the time when I started to really notice a difference, especially compared to my white friends.
I think for me, it's kind of the opposite, where I've always been like really, really thin and like didn't really develop at all until I was like much older. And, growing up like around 4 or 5, I used to always feel ugly because I was so skinny, and everyone used to call me like, Skinny Bone Jones, and like, oh my gosh, do you eat enough? Like, are you eating enough? And it's just like, I am, but I can't gain weight. Like, I don't know how to explain it. And so for me, it brought up a lot of insecurities, and I still feel that way now, because nowadays it's like, oh no, you want to be thick and curvaceous and have big boobs and have a big butt. And it's just like, when you don't fit that, then it's like, okay, am I just chopped liver?
Right.
And I feel like ugly sometimes too in my own skin, and that's just the way my natural body is.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing like how for like a lot of folks like that, the messaging starts like really early on, and like even still impacts folks like till this day. And I don't think like, grappling with body image is something that like just ends all of a sudden. It's just like it ebbs and flows. At least for me, I know that it does, especially like gaining weight, especially after I had my daughter. I was like, oh, hello, new body, new body. I wasn't ready for you. But when I think about like those earlier formative experiences, like it took me a while to be okay with my body, because I remember like being 10 and like having like grown men give me attention, and it scared me. To even through adulthood, like I didn't realize that like I was walking around with this like intense fear of men because of like how they would always approach me. Because in my mind, I'm like, clearly I'm a little girl, but the way that they were like maneuvering and saying stuff, I was like, you don't see me as such, so I didn't feel like protected. I remember walking with my mom one time, and like I'm holding her hand, and then like at this point I was like 10, 11. And like, dude, like this guy had gray hair, so he was older, and started saying things. And me and my mom just looked at each other, and I knew I was good because I was with her, but it was just always like something that I was super mindful of from a very early on, that like they don't see me as a child, and that was scary for me.
I can definitely relate to that, because my family, they're primarily from New York. And New York, the attitude over there, especially the male attitude over there, is completely different. So it doesn't matter how old you are. And I remember being, I think it was 7th grade. And from 7th grade for me was like 2013. And that was the year of like the ripped, super short, like coochie cutter jeans. And it was so fun. And I was like, Mom, my friends, like we all want to get these matching shorts. She was like, absolutely not. Because I had, this curvaceous body. And she was like, no. And I remember one time very distinctly, I think I was in the 8th grade. I went to Dunkin' Donuts. I walked maybe 1 block. And I was wearing jeans that were not, to me, short. And I remember holding, I don't think I looked any sort of way. We didn't have masks back then, so you got to see my face. I was just holding my cup of coffee, and I had a man ask me, "Can I have a sip of your coffee?" And
Excuse me?
I just looked at him. I was like, I am 12. I was like, I am 12 years old.
Right.
And I kept on walking, and I just remember being so scared. And even though it was only a block, I was like, so much happened to me in the span of 1 block, 200 steps maybe. And I was terrified because I was like, if that is how I'm seen, my little sister now, she just turned 13, and she developed way earlier than I did. And I'm terrified for her, but at the same time, I don't want to project that you always have to be aware of a man onto her, and it just hurts a lot because I want her to be a kid, but she can't be a kid because of the way she looks.
Right.
And it hurts my heart.
Yeah, I definitely had a similar experience. I remember, I think it was 6th or 7th grade. We were walking the mall. I remember I just got my phone. I was so excited. And then this guy, he's like in his late 20s, and I'm like 12, comes up to me and is, trying to talk to me. And I just remember running away crying because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. I had never been exposed to that or an experience to that. So that was definitely a scary moment.
I think those are also things that, and speaking from my experience that I've also had similar to you guys, like I think those are things that you carry with you, especially in trying to build relationships as you get older with male figures, even if it's not romantic, just like relationships in terms that you can trust them, it becomes really hard because you don't know, it's like you don't know what they're looking for.
Their intentions.
Exactly, their intentions, or can I be myself around you? Can I wear what I want to wear around you? Or do I have to be cautious of how I present myself in order for you to feel comfortable or for me to feel comfortable even? Like, I think it's something that can be very traumatizing that's not talked about often. And I think it's something that deserves more awareness for sure.
I feel like you brought up a really great point because, if I'm in my own house and there's going to be men in the house, why do I have to change my clothing? Like, first of all, why are you potentially thinking of me in that way that I have to change if I'm wearing like shorts or like home clothes? You know what I mean? Like, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about family, it's just like, then what kind of men are you bringing around
Right.
here? Like, maybe they shouldn't be here. But I feel like a lot of the messaging is about like for girls and women to be mindful of what they're wearing so that these men won't, show you any sort of attention or won't do anything. It's just like the conversation definitely needs to be flipped. And when we talk about like whose burden is this responsibility, it's oftentimes placed on girls and women, but it's not. It really isn't. And I think that's part of the problematic piece of like rape culture, because that like continues to reinforce this. Like when something happens, where was she? Who was she with? What was she wearing? Was she drinking? And like all of these things that validates like negative experiences that girls and women have throughout their lifetime.
And I think you bring up a really good point about like the rape culture, because even now, like I hear a story, and even as a woman, I know like it's not her fault. I know it's not her fault. Like, you don't know what happened, who that person was, is he a predator? You're still thinking those things in the back of my mind. Subconsciously, I'm still thinking, well, why is she in that situation? Did she drink something bad? Like,
Yeah.
and it's so awful because as women, we're aware of that fact it's not our fault, but because of society and all the things that they've placed on us, we always are thinking about it, even if we know it's not wrong.
Right. Absolutely.
And kind of going back to what you said about the burden that women bear, I remember like my mom always taught me about modesty and, dressing appropriately. And I think it is important to dress appropriately and to not show too much, but I feel like all her talks about modesty made me afraid to be proud of my body. And so I feel like I wore baggy clothes up until just about a couple of months ago. Because I was afraid to, show off my curves or show some of my body, because she always pushed, hey, like, don't show it off, don't do too much. So we definitely carry a lot of that burden.
I think for me, like the message about like modesty wasn't necessarily coming from family, but from like being like out there and how people respond to me. So I was like, in my mind, if I wear like looser clothes or baggier clothes, I won't get that attention. But because again, like this is something that I experienced like at a very young age. And I remember going to the store when I was 14, and there was this guy that was who worked there that was always just lurking around. I'm like, okay, I know like he's trying to talk to me, but I'm not trying to talk to him. And one day he was waiting for me outside of the store. He was like, yo, what's up? Like, where you going? Whatever. And he was like, how old are you? I'm like, well, how old are you? And he said he was 19. And this is like, I thought I was so good. I was like, I'm about to get him. He's going to ask me how old I am. I'm going to tell him. So he was like, how old are you? I was like, I'm 14, thinking like that's a clear, like you're just not going to, continue the conversation. He was like, so what's up? Like, what's good? I was like, oh my God. I ran home. Because like for me, it's like, I'm a child.
Right.
Like in my mind, I'm like, you're an adult, you're 19. Like I'm 14 years old. I'm still in middle school, bro. Like, but the idea that again, my youth, my innocence won't be protected because it wasn't necessarily like viewed as such. And that was like, again, like validated feelings that I had from a younger age. But this idea, this constant reinforcement of, it doesn't matter if you're a child, right? Because look at what you look like.